Hello and welcome to this WION's exclusive coverage of the summit here in Riyadh. We're welcoming Jonathan Robinson, the Chief Investment Officer at the Diriyah company. Hello, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, we are here.
Yeah.
You're a Chief Investment Officer. What's your take of the event so far?
Look, I think, first of all, I'm delighted with the event. I'm delighted with the attendance. I'm delighted with the level of enthusiasm. I think events like these are a real reflection of where Saudi is in its journey. This is a market now that is really taking, a different space on the international stage, both on the geopolitical, on the economic, on the social front. We're welcoming the world now into Saudi Arabia as tourists, as residences, as investors. Exactly. So I think, look, my reaction to an event like this, it's very, very positive. I think the vibe in the room is electric. I think the world is really starting to sit up and take notice of all the things that are happening in Riyadh.
Right, so you spoke about it. I wanted to talk about the investment landscape, the changing investment landscape of many different economies, like the emerging markets taking Saudi Arabia jumping in now. So what's your take on that, on the investment landscape per se?
So, okay, I'm gonna give you a first take on the global landscape, and then we're gonna start to get down to the drill, right? So I think, look, the global landscape for investors who are liquid and looking to deploy capital is a bit of a mixed bag. There's some challenges in Asia. There are some challenges in Europe for sure. I think there's potentially some new challenges in North America, on both sides of North America. If you are an investor today and you are liquid and you're looking to deploy liquidity, the opportunity to deploy that and to get a yield increment, a yield pickup, are a little bit more limited than they may have been in the past. Certainly there's some elements of opportunity in Latin America. But the real growth in the emerging markets got to be in the Middle Eastern subcontinent. And within the Middle East, then Saudi Arabia has to be on the radar. Saudi economy represents more than 50% of the GDP of the GCC. This is an economy that is big, it's growing, has a young, very mobile population. Okay, within Saudi Arabia, so Saudi is the engine room of growth for the Middle East. Within Saudi Arabia has to be Riyadh, right? This is a city of little over 8 million people today. Growth trajectory to get us to 13, 15 million people in the visible future, right? Already today is growing quite rapidly. So the investment story, right? For investors, global investors with liquidity, got to be in the Middle East. You have to be here. You definitely want to be in Saudi Arabia. If you're going to be in Saudi Arabia, you definitely want to be in Riyadh. It's a good growth story. What we're doing in Diriyah is just on the outskirts of Riyadh today. We're 15 minutes away from Diriyah Center. We're building a city that will be home for 100,000 people. So I think when I say that as the investment landscape, really I think the case for investment in Saudi Arabia, the case for investment in Riyadh and in Diriyah is very, very compelling.
Right. Now, moving a bit further, what are the challenges that you see? Because we've seen FDI and investment landscape kind of easing off over the last decade.
Yep.
So, and there are quite a lot of challenges as well, where when it comes to geopolitics, for example, right? So what's your take on that? What are the risks that you see?
I think FDI have eased in certain areas and it's picking up in other areas. Sure. And what we're seeing here on the ground in Saudi Arabia is it's picking up. And in fact, what we project for FDI over the coming few years is very bold, I think. We expect to be mobilizing a significant amount of international capital into the kingdom, and we're very, very confident we've got the business case to do that. Now, some of the challenges that we have, one for sure is visibility. This is a market where I think we have a challenge ahead of us to increase visibility. I mentioned at the outset, that there's a changing landscape here, the social contract, the geopolitical space, the role that Saudi Arabia is going to take in the international context, including economic context. But with that, hand in hand, has to come increased visibility. One of the things that we are working on is to really raise the visibility, not just of the kingdom, but all the opportunities across the kingdom, including in Diriyah, in markets such as Asia, the subcontinent, Europe, and the Americas. Where we are today, very, very encouraging. We're having conversations today with investors from Singapore all the way to San Francisco of all different types. And so I think one of the challenges we have is that visibility challenge. Now, we're also in an emerging regulatory space.
Right.
We're working very hard to enact new regulations that help to mobilize even more investment. Already proven very successful, there's more to come.
Right. When I was coming from the airport, I saw a lot of construction. And I see that, I know what you're speaking about. There is a change, is what I've heard as well. I'm seeing the change as well. But what about the skill development, for example? If you're talking about opening up an economy to get investors to come into for tourism, for example, where do you see that with the education and skill level for the youth, for example?
Sure. Okay, those two things go hand in hand. I think already we're blessed with a very large, young, skilled population. Okay, with a very bold, visionary, but also very connected to this young population leadership. And so we're blessed with I think a very good population. And proof of the pudding, upwards of 80% of our staff complement today is Saudi, and 15% of that comes from Diriyah, so from our own neighborhood here. So there's good evidence to say that there's a very good skilled workforce here to capitalize on. And now you also mentioned on the touristic side and what we're doing on tourism, right? We're also easing some of the ways in which tourists can come and visit the kingdom, including people who come on the Hajj, okay, where they can come now to the kingdom and spend 2 or 3 days visiting the wider kingdom. Proof of successes so far. We set as a target to have 100 million touristic visits by 2030. We've already surpassed that. Yeah. Now we're setting a new ambitious target of 150 million touristic visits, and for Diriyah, we're saying 50 million touristic visits by 2030.
That's a third.
That's a third, and we're already on our way. We're already on our way. So I think, look, there's a lot of change afoot here, which is very, very encouraging. And as I say, proof positive is in what we're seeing on the ground in real results. Number of touristic visits, the ability to employ a greater and greater proportion of your workforce being Saudi, and that's got to be the right direction to travel.
Right. Now, do you think the diversification away from the oil economy, based on the Vision 2030 and the plans as such, do you see that happening faster than you think at this time, or do you think it's going to take a little longer then?
I definitely don't think it's going to be longer. It was already a very ambitious target. But look, I think we are well on our way to achieving that. I mentioned, for example, touristic visits, right? We set a target of 100 million. We already surpassed 100 million. And for Diriyah, our small role in this big picture, we expect to contribute almost $19 billion to Saudi GDP from Diriyah through 50 million touristic visits. So I think already the right components are there to give us the confidence we will achieve this. The goal is to take us from 40% to 65% non-oil contribution to GDP. I think we're well on our way to achieving that, and I think you will see over the coming 2, 3, 4 years an accelerated evidence that we're getting there.
Right. What about investments outside of Saudi as well? Because I've seen the PIF and all these sovereign wealth funds from the entire region, GCC, looking at deals all over the world, especially in India and Asia as well. So what's your take on, let's say, India? Where does India stand for Saudi?
Okay, so there's really two parts to this equation, right? There's outbound investment and inbound investment. And I think it would be right to say we are encouraging both. And I don't represent the outbound investment. My colleagues at PIF are the primary drivers behind that. But there's a very, very close, as you know, relationship between India and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, one that is both very close and growing. I think from the inbound investment standpoint, already we're engaging with our friends in India at different levels, both governmental levels as well as commercial, This is both as investors, as equity and debt on funds and what have you. And I think the traction that we're getting today, again, very encouraging. What I would like to see is I'd like to see a doubling or a tripling of that number. Okay, there's a lot of opportunity here. The relationship is so good. The understanding between cross cultures is so good that there's ample room to double or triple that. So I'll tell you right here, right now, if we could double or triple the amount of inbound investment coming in from India, we would be more than happy with that result.
All right, fantastic. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.